Senior Research Officer in Inland Fisheries Ireland, and I work with Tony here, who's going to give the presentation, so I'll hand over to him.
Yeah, so hi everyone. So my name is Tony Brett. I work for the DiadSea Project in Inland Fisheries Ireland. So I've worked at Inland Fisheries Ireland since about 2017 in various different roles. And so this is my current project that I'm working on with Ciara O'Leary, who's a Senior Research Officer. So the overall content of today is I'm going to give you a project overview of the DiadSea project with our 2025 plans. I'm going to give you an idea of an identification booklet that we've created within the project itself. I'm going to talk to you about the Transnational Observatory, which is an output of the project, and I'm going to discuss some ideas for collaboration that we've have for between Rivers Trust and IFI. We had a meeting with Mark back in September, so we had some ideas that we wanted to maybe discuss with you guys as well. So what is the DiadSea project? So it's an EU-funded Interreg Atlantic Area project, and it focuses on migratory diadromous fish in the marine environment. The aim is to assess serious knowledge gaps which exist with these species, anticipate the distribution range shifts of diadromous fish due to climate and oceanographic changes in the future, and foster transnational cooperation in the Atlantic area that would enhance the management and conservation of diadromous fish overall. The project lifespan is from November 2023 when it started to October 2026. So this graphic I really like. It gives an idea of the fish species that we're focusing on in this project overall. So why are diadromous fish important? So I don't want to assume that everyone knows what the term diadromous means. So it means that this diadromous species of fish migrate between marine and freshwater environments. So this can be broken down even more so to anadromous and catadromous. So anadromous fish, you think of things like salmon and sea trout. These are fish that are born in freshwater, migrate to the marine environment to develop and grow, and then they spawn once again in freshwater. And catadromous, think of mullet. These are fish that are born in freshwater and feed and develop in estuarine and freshwater environments. So because of this migration that takes place, they're quite ecologically important species. They are involved in quite a lot of nutrient transfer because they move between different water bodies, and they provide ecosystem services. So things like provisioning services in certain countries, species like sea lamprey and shad are very sought after food sources, maybe not so in Ireland, but in continental Europe. They provide regulating services, as I mentioned, nutrient transfer, but also being a major part of the food web and food source for various other species. And they provide cultural services. So specifically in Ireland, the main cultural services of diadromous fish would really be shad angling, which occurs on the Barrow, Munster Blackwater, and some of the systems in which they migrate into. So they have quite complex life cycles, but because of this, they are actually quite difficult to survey and manage. So hence a project like this coming about. So within DiadSea, there are 9 beneficiary project partners across Portugal, Spain, France, and Ireland. And in Ireland, the Marine Institute and Inland Fisheries Ireland are the representatives. So you can see on the map here the array of different institutions that are involved across Europe. The key activities of the project, so number 1 be mapping and monitoring. This is identifying and mapping critical habitats for diadromous fish in the ocean. The second key activity is climate impact assessment. So this will be using advanced models to predict how climate change will affect these fish and their habitats into the future. Number 3 is creating an observatory, which I will go into a bit more detail later. And this will be establishing a comprehensive observatory to monitor diadromous fish populations and their movements. And number 4 will be knowledge sharing and disseminating any findings that we get from the project and disseminating this to the stakeholders, local communities, policymakers, and conservation organizations. So the overall aim of the project is to protect these species and their habitats, which in turn would benefit local communities both economically, culturally, and ecologically, as I've already mentioned with the ecosystem services. So we kicked off the project back in May. We had a project partner meeting in Rennes in France. So this is where we officially launched the project. We had discussions about the work packages that were involved in the project and the works going forward. and we had stakeholder engagement presentations and disseminated our work plans to them. So it was a very productive 2.5 days. So speaking of work packages, these are the overall 5 work packages for the project. And I'm not going to go into detail biological data collection, and that is the work package that IFI is leading. So I think if you want to read, obviously, all of the details for this, you can pause the video and have a look at it. But from our perspective, I suppose the main thing to take away from this graphic is how all the work packages link up together and how it's quite a collaborative effort across the different countries. So regarding work package 1 and the biological data collation, it's split into 4 subtasks. So the first is to compile historical fisheries data for diadromous fish in the marine environment. 1.2 is assessing data gaps and defining solutions for these data gaps. 1.3 is filling data gaps in the marine phase using microchemistry analysis, genetic analysis, and various other surveys, be it eDNA surveys that we have planned or angler surveys. And 1.4 is networking activities and stakeholder engagement. And the University of Evora will be running that, and that will be later on in the project's life stage. So the target species for the project, you're probably all familiar with Atlantic salmon, sea trout, and European eel. But I always have to remind myself that when I started working in fisheries, I wasn't familiar with species of shad, the various species of lamprey and smelt, for example. So to some people, these are probably well-known species. For me, for example, having worked with them for a few years, I'm very familiar with these species, but generally these are lesser-known species. And because of that, they generally get underreported. People don't really know a lot about them. And that leads me into one of the next outputs that I want to talk about, and that is an identification booklet that we created for this project. So this was a deliverable under Work Package 1, Task 1.2, and we created it to counteract the existing data gaps of underreporting diadromous fish and misidentification of species that we notice occurs generally. So these species are hugely important ecologically, culturally, and economically in some countries, maybe not necessarily in Ireland. But because of this, they're typically underreported because of their lack of economic importance and generally regarded as bycatch. So I think gathering information about these fish and their habitat usage at sea is crucial in conserving these species into the future. So that's why we developed this booklet. The main aim of it is to aid in accurate diadromous fish identification at sea and increase diadromous fish presence reporting at sea. So the booklet, how it works, is quite simple. It outlines identifiable features of each species and provides visual aids, as you can see here. We have 1 species per page. We provide a reference page at the end for species where there may be a little bit of confusion in identification, such as eels and lampreys that may look somewhat similar to people. And we also provide a source of reporting capture records for these species, and that is the diad@fisheriesireland.ie website, or email address, sorry. So you can see here we have your images, your identifiable features, and we also have a little calendar at the bottom, which outlines throughout the year whether the fish species will be more predominantly marine-based or freshwater-based. It's difficult with salmon, that's why we have marine or freshwater for that, because the different life stages will be in either marine or freshwater throughout the year, but it's more clear-cut with something like river lamprey, which migrate into the freshwater and are present there in March, April, and May. So this is what it looks like for the thwaite shad, the flounder, and the sea lamprey. And this is the comparative pages I was talking about. So we have salmon versus sea trout, the jaw sizes that are definable features comparison between the 2 of them. European eel versus sea lamprey, and European eel versus conger eel. We also have a page dedicated to lamprey wound identification. And this is something that we are interested in as well. We want to see if people are catching fish with lamprey marks on them. So we encourage people to report on where they're catching these fish, the size of the marks, the species of the fish. And this will give us an understanding of the prey species that lamprey are particularly feeding on and which areas they are living when they're at sea and where they're predating on other fish. And then you can send all this information to the diad@fisheriesireland.ie email address as well. So the application of the booklet, so we're hoping to distribute it to research vessels, use it as an ID guide for sea anglers, And of course, if you guys have any suggestions for this booklet, having seen it now, are always welcome. As this is only a new output for us, it'll be finalized in March. So we're hoping to have an online e-version of it as well that will be on the Inland Fisheries Ireland website. So if you have any suggestions as how to apply it, please let us know. So I previously presented this booklet at the Fisheries Ecosystem Advisory Service meeting back in September, and we put some of these booklets out onto the Irish Groundfish Survey this year and the ICECO Marine Institute Survey. So we're waiting feedback from them on how they could apply it in the field and how useful they found it. So I've been talking about data collation. So where's all the data going? So all the data we collect in Work Package 1 will be fed into Work Package 3, and that is led by our colleagues at INRAE in France. They were working on marine distribution models, baseline and predictive models relating to climate change, identifying areas of high importance for diadromous fish, and creating species-specific distribution maps used to rank each species in terms of climate vulnerability, which would look something like this. And all this data will be fed into the interactive web atlas, which looks like this. And this was an output from the previous iteration of this project known as the DiadSea Project. So this will map and display diadromous fish distribution at sea while assessing priority areas of conservation. So it's a good visual aid as well to where these fish have been turning up and visualize the data that we've been collecting. So one thing I wanted to discuss as well is the Transnational Observatory. We had a meeting with Mark back in September where we explained a little bit about this to him, so we just wanted to explain it in a little bit more detail today. So the aim of this output is to set up an observatory comprising of stakeholders involved in diadromous fish management and conservation across the Atlantic area. So the first step for us is to set up a national working group in Ireland. So we need to create a group of experts in Ireland who work with diadromous fish and discuss any issues that they have noticed or identified regarding diadromous fish in Ireland, and bring these issues then to a larger platform or the larger observatory that will be held with all the other project partners, and through that find common solutions and issues across the Atlantic area. So once we've established our national working group, which Mark was happy to potentially participate in, the second step would be to find a representative from a national group and bring our ideas to the larger meeting. And then once we've had that meeting, the third step is to create adaptive management plans for the overall Atlantic area, where everybody's working together and everything. So make some plans that suit everybody and benefit everybody essentially. So some questions for you guys relating to the observatory regarding diadromous fish, and you don't have to answer them today. You can go away, think about them, and maybe send answers to Mark or email us directly. But do you guys have any questions that you would like to ask about how other countries manage their fisheries? Do you know how fish stocks are doing in other countries? Would you be interested in getting feedback on how fish stocks are doing in other countries? And would you be interested in participating in an observatory like this yourself? So let us know or let Mark know, and we can see going forward. So our work plans for 2025. Survey work that we have planned is eDNA sampling in Waterford and Munster Blackwater in around Youghal. We have harbour visits planned where we're going to be interviewing, surveying trawlers and research vessels. We have angler surveys planned where we're going to interview recreational anglers around the coast to see if they're catching diadromous fish. We have various reports that we're going to be working on, looking at data gaps and progress reports. There will be sample analysis of genetics and microchemistry of sea trout and shad, and we have various large-scale meetings like the Transnational Observatory, which will be during the summer of 2025, and we're actually hosting the interim DiadSea Partners meeting in October. So my last slide that I want to, I suppose, discuss with you is a crossover with the Rivers Trust and IFI in the future. So we've previously discussed this with Mark, and these are a couple of ideas that we come up with in our discussions. So we wanted to organize a game session day with the Rivers Trust. We have two different games which have been outputs of the DiadSea project and the current DiadSea project. One of them is called DiadSea Land. It's a catchment management board game. And the other is a card game, which has only recently actually been produced, so we haven't even had a chance to play it yet. But again, that's based on fish migration. And we think, they're a great conversation starter for fisheries management and seeing other people's perspective when it comes to diadromous fish and getting a bit of a sense of how other people view them and teaching people about fisheries management. So we'd love to organize a game session day with you guys and show you what we have. We discussed the idea of Rivers Trust presenting localized projects and ongoing works to IFI staff, whether it's a short-term presentation, small intervals over a couple of weeks. We'd love to see what's going on. I think it would be beneficial to see what works are happening around the country. An on-site meeting with IFI and Rivers Trust could be possible in 2025 relating to maybe Elver surveys, lamprey red identification. We could work on that in the future, exploring generally how Rivers Trust and IFI could work closer together and incorporate some of the work that they're doing into reporting. Ciara had the idea of barrier engagement, which would be creating time-lapse imagery of barriers pre and post removal. Like, you have a lot of guys on the ground near barriers and weirs, so if you could take regular photos of them prior to works being undertaken, it would be really beneficial to see the changes over time. And of course, if you guys have any other ideas for crossovers, please let us know. So thank you very much for listening. These are contact details for myself and Ciara, and at the bottom there are links to the DiadSea Twitter, LinkedIn, and an email address for the project leaders in Portugal. And we also have a DiadSea website link on the Inland Fisheries Ireland webpage, so we have a page for it there. So that's me, so I'm going to just stop sharing. So thank you very much.